There's just so many reasons why I'm happy about this graphics card, and honestly, people are just looking at this the completely wrong way. Don't go anywhere. Alright, so for like the 6 of you that actually haven't seen any RX 6500 XT content already, let me get you up to speed extremely quickly before we talk about why exactly I'm actually thrilled about this GPU launch, and I think you should be as well. Humongous shout out, by the way, to PowerColor for sending over this fighter card so Sam could run the benchmarks well ahead of this embargo drop. So AMD announced this super trimmed down budget GPU at CES a couple of weeks ago, and it's set to launch at an MSRP of $200, and we all know that clearly is not gonna happen. I'm honestly gonna guess that this card is going to be purchasable for around $350-ish, but I still like it, so let's move on. The main thing that people are super upset with is that AMD really stripped out some serious features to make this thing as cheap as possible. Specifically, there's no 4K H.264 encoding, H.265/HEVC encoding, there's no AV1 decoding, and it's also only using a 4x link of PCIe Gen 4. We all already know this, but once again, don't go anywhere. With all of these possibly major disadvantages, I already know what most YouTubers' viewpoints are going to be with this graphics card, and a lot of them have already voiced their opinion that you definitely shouldn't buy this GPU. I couldn't disagree with them any more on that opinion, but one thing that I do think we can all agree on is that you really should have Windows activated on all your gaming PCs and gaming PC flips, and good thing I got the perfect sponsor for today's video. Today's video is sponsored by ICMMO.com, which is kindly hooking you guys up with not just an activated version of Windows 10 and removing that nasty watermark, but they're also giving you guys an exclusive AF 35% discount code if you use ZAH35. Buying keys are super simple. Just head on down to the links in the description. Once you add that Windows 10 key to your cart, make sure you use the discount code ZAH35, and that'll drop the price down to less than $10. There's a ton of different ways to pay, including PayPal, and after buying, you'll be able to extract your key. From there, simply press the start button on your desktop, type in activation, paste in your key, and boom, Windows 10 is now activated and you're good to go. Head on down to the links in the description, and big thanks again to ICMMO.com for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so I think it's extremely important to see the numbers and the benchmarking data for this graphics card before my possibly outrageous hot takes on this new GPU, so let's not wait any longer and get rolling on that. Sam and I did build a baller AF new testing rig to test out our GPUs for this video, and we'll talk all about that build after talking about the 6500 XT, but an early shout out to XPG is definitely needed for hooking us up with a ton of these parts. So let's first start with a chart here of the RX 6500 XT versus the slightly more expensive RX 6600. Currently, the 6600 is easily one of the easiest brand new graphics card that you can actually buy right now, and they're usually found between $400 and $475, and I actually really like buying them, especially for people that want a new graphics card and not deal with the used market. Here you can see that the 6600 is doing anywhere from 20 to 40 FPS better, obviously depending on the title, and this is about the same performance that I would expect from a card that costs $150 to $200 more. Real quickly while we are here, the 6500 XT can indeed play any title we tested with at least 60 FPS in decent settings. This isn't 1080p low or anything like we usually do for budget graphics cards, so this is honestly pretty solid results and slightly better than what I personally expected. You can see here that only the first 4 lanes are populated, and I'm no expert in this field, but I do know that this could possibly be an issue for people running budget motherboards with PCIe Gen 3 slots, and that's what most people are worried about. I'm 100% certain that every other YouTuber's video is gonna have a ton of charts showing their benchmarks between Gen 3 and Gen 4 slots, and honestly, you probably already know the answer to that question before watching my video. Good thing that's not what my video is about today. Now don't get me wrong, it's not a smart move that AMD is limiting a budget card like this depending on which motherboard and CPU you use, but remember, there's probably gonna be a single-digit percentage of people who actually buy this graphics card using a motherboard and CPU combo that supports PCIe Gen 4. Instead, most people that are buying this card are gonna be using budget motherboards and CPU combos using Gen 3, and that's what our benchmarks are gonna be based on for today's video. So what does all of this mean? Well, what question have we been asking for the last year of the GPU shortage? Did everybody forget, other than just the prices going down, of course, what have we all been asking for? We wanted budget graphics cards. How many times have we all rolled our eyes when we see a new high-end 3080 Ti, 3090 Ti, or any other GPU launch that costs over $1,000? It's been pretty exhausting. All we've been asking for are budget graphics cards around the $200 to $400 range, and this is exactly AMD's attempt to fix that. Now here's where all of my hot takes are gonna start, and specifically with the most important one. This here is a brand new graphics card. This means that this card is gonna be sold at places like online retailers, physical stores like Best Buy and Micro Center, and probably even the Newegg Shuffle. We currently don't have that option available for new budget graphics cards right now, and I don't think people are understanding how awesome this is. There's so many people out there that are trying to build a new $600 to $800 system, and there's just not a single solid option out there for them right now if they don't want to deal with the used market. This 6500 XT, although definitely limited in features, is exactly their solution so they can finish their builds and jump into PC gaming finally. And knowing that this is a budget graphics card, this card is meant to be purely for budget gamers that want to finish their gaming PC builds. This card isn't meant for video editors that are looking for future-proofed encoding options or anything. This is just a temporary solution so people can finally start PC gaming on something other than integrated graphics. Don't get me wrong, not having these features can definitely affect some of you, but when you zoom out and think about who exactly AMD was targeting for this graphics card launch, I think it mostly makes sense so they could keep their costs down. Also, going back to it being a new card, remember that this means you'll have the ability to return it, file a troubleshooting ticket, use your warranty, etc. These are the features that new builders are actually looking for because it's much safer than taking a gamble on the used market. AMD isn't releasing this GPU to push new technology or boast about crazy price to performance. It's simply to give the desperate PC gaming market a new option to buy at the lowest price point that we have right now, and I'm super happy that they did. Now, there are other graphics cards to compare this one to. The only reason we used the 6600 was for reference, but now one that you should definitely just completely remove out of your head is the RTX 3050, which I don't have in the studio, unfortunately, but please don't even start to make that comparison. The RTX 3050 and RX 6500 XT are in no way going to compete against one another because we already know that the 6500 XT is extremely limited in features, especially compared to the suite of features that NVIDIA and the RTX platform has, but also there's no way that the RTX 3050's price isn't going to be all the way jacked up to like the $500-ish range, and these cards just aren't going to be on the same level in terms of pricing at all. Now, one card that I think you should compare this card to is the RX 580, but that's specifically for PC flippers in mind that are debating about buying a used $200 to $300 580 or the now brand new 6500 XT. Here's our chart showing our 6500 XT versus RX 580 benchmarks, and as you can see, they are indeed trading blows with each other depending on the title, but the 6500 XT is slightly better on average. Don't get me wrong, this is a very harsh reminder that this 2022 release GPU is competing with a card that came out all the way back in 2017, but remember, the 6500 XT's purpose isn't to have bleeding edge technology or price to performance, it's simply to provide a brand new option for people to buy around this $200 to $400 price point and around this 1080p medium to high settings level of performance. Also, just as a reminder, in case you're skipping around this video, this is testing the 6500 XT and the RX 580 with PCIe Gen 3. Now, one thing that I do want to mention real quickly, just to balance things out a bit, is to talk about these ports. I have never seen a graphics card in the last 5 years launch with only 2 outputs, and that can definitely be frustrating to some of you. I'm not sure if this is how most cards will be or just this power color fighter, but either way, if you were planning on running a multi-monitor setup, please be sure to research this ahead of time before buying. Now, this video isn't over yet, but I want to hear you guys sound off in the comment section. After hearing my opinions on the 6500 XT, what are you guys thinking? And I know I got a little bit heated there for a second, but let's try to relax and just stay a little bit calm down there in the comment section. One thing that I think we can actually agree on though is this absolutely fire testing build that we built today, so we gotta talk about what's inside of it. And real quickly, we are gonna be selling this build during the next ZTT website launch on February 1st, and we'll be selling it with the Sapphire Pulse RX 6600 in there for anyone that's interested in that. So like I said, huge shout out to XPG for supplying a lot of these parts, and I'm actually super happy that they sent over these because I wasn't too familiar with some of these products and they were awesome for our testing. The case that everything is inside of is the XPG Defender Pro, and this thing is somehow both a tank and an absolute beauty. I'm in love with the front mesh design and clean AF all black aesthetic, and you guys know that I typically take advantage of PSU cutouts like this so I can vinyl wrap the power supply, but even the aesthetic of the XPG Core Reactor 750 Gold was on point as well. This was a perfect amount of juice for our testing, by the way, and I don't comment too often on the aesthetic of power supplies, but they nailed this one. XPG also sent over the GAMX S70 1TB NVMe drive, which was an absolute monster as well. We're talking PCIe 4.0 speeds of up to 7400 over 6800, which is obnoxiously fast. They also sent sent our RAM kit today, which is the Spectrix RGB D60G, and we used a 2x8GB kit clocked at 3600 megahertz. They did send out a 32GB kit, but I wanted to keep it at 16GB to give a realistic testing scenario for someone that would actually be buying a 6500 XT. Same thing with the CPU. We tested today with the 5600G, and if you'll recall what I said earlier, this CPU doesn't support PCIe Gen 4, and this is honestly probably the highest end CPU that anyone on the planet is going to be pairing with a budget card like the 6500 XT. Remember that this build today isn't a build guide that you should follow because of this Gen 3 and Gen 4 solution. You could be leaving performance on the table, but instead it provides us with a realistic testing environment using Gen 3 speeds that you'll find on more budget CPU motherboard combos. Cooling our CPU though today, by the way, is the XPG Levante 240 AIO, which looks minimal and clean AF and kept our temperatures very nice and chilly. Here's what the final parts list is looking like with everything else, and once again, I just wanted to use something that was a bit more realistic for people interested in the cards that we tested today, instead of putting something like a 13900K in there. Once again, please let me know what you guys are thinking about the 6500 XT after hearing my opinions. I'm super excited to hear yours. Also, feel free to click the video that's on the screen now if you want to find out my favorite budget used graphics card that you should be buying right now. But just like always, I hope you enjoyed this video.